Yeah, hi everyone. My guest today is Adeline Lee Chai Suan. Adeline Lee is an experienced product and growth expert. She brings expertise from both B2B and B2C products within the telecommunication, healthcare, and design spaces in both Europe and Asia. She's passionate about building high performance teams and also advising early stage startups. Adeline Lee, I'm so honored to talk to you today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Tina. I'm really happy that you invited me here as well.
You are product and growth expert currently working at Amboss, a digital medical dictionary and learning tool for doctors. You are also venture partner at Antler, a global early stage VC firm. You are formerly product growth and monetization at Gluapp, a period and fertility health app, and former director at growth at Framer, one of the leading design tools. A really impressive CV, and I have only listed the most recent ones. What drives you?
Ah, um, I think what drives me, I think the simplest thing is working on products that has impact. I think, as you mentioned, if you meant you just mentioned the most recent startups I've worked with, and I think if you look at every one of them, there is impact, whether or not global or to a specific market or specific user segment. I feel strongly that for whatever product I work with, I need to have that feeling of passion and that I'm also changing something. And that's some I would say that in a nutshell, that is something that drives me.
You've been working in Amsterdam, Oslo, Kuala Lumpur, Berlin, many cities more, I expect. Are product and experience teams working differently in Kuala Lumpur than in Berlin, for example?
Definitely. If I mean, let's not put about just work culture. I mean, just relationships. Understanding the cultural subtleties are already different. So yeah, if you ask me how is it in Malaysia and in Berlin, um, people work differently. But for me, that's the fun part about working abroad as well. I mean, that's why you mentioned all these different cities, and for me, some might see it as a deterrent or a negative point that, oh yeah, you kind of need to kind of adapt a little bit the way you are working in the different cultures that you're in. But for me, I find it really interesting because I know I'm also quite interested with this whole human interaction, human psychology. For each of the new countries that I live in, it does take a while to understand, like, okay, this is how people actually say yes, this is how actually people say no, or this is how people actually like to hear feedback. And for me, I think that is from a more personal level, I think that kind of keeps me a little bit on my toes. It makes me feel like, okay, I'm also improving as an individual, not just helping build different, teams and better products, but like I'm also growing as I move around.
To the psychology part, we make it later. Your current
Mm-hmm.
company is Amboss,
Mm-hmm.
a medical dictionary learning tool for doctors. What's Amboss' mission and how are you helping them to grow the product there?
So yeah, Amboss is actually a medical tech company. They started off as offering study resource to medical students in Germany. So in a nutshell, just to say it simply, if you are a medical student here in Germany and it takes a long time to study, it's you want to be a good doctor. And of course, you go to school, you go to medical school, you study, you learn, you do everything. But the point is, are you really ready to go out to the real world? And this is where Amboss comes in. Amboss was built by doctors themselves, all these medical students that went through this really heavy studying, and they said, like, you know what, there must be a better way for us to learn about being a doctor, and that was how they came up with this idea. It was started by doctors for future doctors. And that was one of the reasons why I'm also really passionate about what they are doing. Of course, I'm not a doctor, but like I'm very interested in the education piece. What I'm doing there. So Amboss is a web product. So as a study tool, they're available on web, but of course they also have the mobile piece, and the mobile piece from Amboss has always been there since pretty much in the beginning of their product offering. But at this point in their product life cycle, they started figuring that, mobile is becoming a much more prominent or important element in the whole study life cycle as well. And I'm here to look into the mobile strategy and to kind of also to give some direction of like how can we bring the whole mobile piece in a lot of like synergy with what they're offering already right now. So yeah, also very interesting.
In terms of strategy and directions, what do you do?
What do I do in terms of strategy? It's what do I do in that sense? I work a lot with the management team to understand what can we innovate next from this using this particular channel in order to basically delight the users, and of course also improving a lot of the current interactions that we already have built up till now.
And how do you do? Do you use data research methods, tools? How do you do it? How do you get to new ideas or deciding if ideas are going to get developed?
You are actually quite spot on two things. Amboss definitely perceives themselves as a very data-driven company. So if you mentioned both the things, data as well as research. In fact, when I joined them in May, the first thing when we were thinking about the strategy is not just about like, let's look at a competitor, let's try to have the same things there, but rather we kind of looked internally and asked ourselves like, so what do we already know about the users? Let's make sure that we actually have the right baselines, because these are the people that has been using the product. We looked into that, and for those missing pieces, we were trying to also fill those gaps. And I think we spent quite a lot of time also talking to existing users. So that's the piece of research part, which we did on a very light touch, understanding what kind of value did they feel that this mobile channel has brought to them. But then, of course, then we also look externally and say like, okay, so these are the innovations right now from mobile in a similar category. Can we bring that together? Is this what the users really want? So we are asking ourselves a little bit that two pieces, kind of joining what we know internally with the use cases that we see the users are using versus what is also out there. Whether we have the right answer, it is a difficult one, to be honest. And I think that's always with all kinds of strategy. You kind of have to see the data, listen to the users, but at the same time, you also need to trust your gut and some of the intuition to say like, okay, you know what, we need to make a decision. We need to move forward. Okay, then let's try this. That's where we are right now.
How important is one's intuition in relation to data's insights and user research?
I would say it's a little bit of I would say data is only as useful. I mean, for me, data is data. If you are, and you can derive different kind of insights out of it. And I'm not saying that, oh yeah, use this data to bias the results based on what you want. But what I'm saying is like you also need to use data in a smart way. You need to ask the right questions first. So again, when I say data driven, it doesn't mean like let's just look 100% at data and just talk to the users and follow whatever they want. So that's where the intuition piece comes in, right? You come in with the experience. You said, okay, this is how we need to ask questions about data. Does this make sense? Is it right to even measure this information this way? Will this offer me understanding to a critical question I'm trying to answer? I know this sounds all vague because I can't really give direct, concrete answers to what are the things that I'm specifically looking into. But for me, that's my perspective. I always say data and research is important, but data is here to support you. They are not there to define and dictate that this is how you do. They are there. Use it wisely. And yeah, because I do see sometimes some companies, they're like, oh, but my data says this. And like, so now I have to absolutely do this. And sometimes they just forget to ask the right question. Is this really what you want? Are you measuring the right things? Because, there tend to be so many vanity metrics. Like, I don't know, sometimes you just say like, oh yeah, how many people click this button? And then I said like, does it matter how many people click this button? Because it really doesn't matter. Because I said like, does it matter? Then the question maybe should be like, did the right people click your button versus how many people click your button? And I think that is more fundamental.
There are so many true points in your answer, so I'm not gonna start. I think using it wise, not taking all data, only data from quantitative research, probably to get better products. And I think this is why so many experts, are experts and need to have some experience to know what is good and what is bad, not only focusing on numbers and data. So, do you have a currently biggest challenge at Amboss?
Biggest challenge. I wouldn't say challenge. I think one thing that drive me to join the company was also that they are at the verge of exponential growth in terms of the company size. I think they are at about 300 employees at the moment. And I would say this is the largest startup size at the moment that I've been in. And you can see there are different challenges in terms of scaling at this point. It's like processes that you set up in place for like 50 or 100 people now doesn't work out that well. So that are some of like the general challenges. But I would say otherwise, typical startup challenges apply. You still have all this different, there's still chaos. It's normal. It's like business as usual in a startup.
Did you change something when you started at Amboss in your team? Or, you said you're trying to give strategy device advice to make decisions based on data. Do you have implemented new tools, or do you have to go deeper into data? Was it done before?
I would say the fact that I'm mentioning I'm working on strategy, and again, I know this word is like a bad word in my mind as well.
Know what you mean?
Yeah, I know. It's like it's a bad word in my mind, and like I don't have a better word to say. Oh yeah, it's maybe like a mobile task tech team, whatever. Anyway, what I've implemented, I think what I'm trying to bring to the team while we were thinking about this strategy is the way of working. So again, as I mentioned, Amboss is like a typical startup, a lot of hustling, but it is a web first startup. So again, I'm trying to also bring in a little bit of the mobile startup mindset, how we think about product development in terms of mobile. So I think most of the time prior to this, there is a mobile team, but I think it's always kind of like following how the web development is, so that's fine. That's not a problem. But where my expertise come from is also from mobile development, where we iterate and we kind of build things kind of quicker, break things faster. So that's a little bit where I'm kind of trying to bring a little bit of that kind of like mobile DNA into the company. Of course, it's still work in progress, but I'm pretty excited about that.
Sounds good. And Ambos is not your first medical product. I think 5 years ago, was it? You worked for Clue, a period and fertility tracking mobile app, which is, by the way, one of the first femtech companies that took female reproductive health out of the taboo land. What's it like to develop an app that is, let's say, in such an unknown area before? There were obviously not much competitors back then that you could use as reference for growth experiments and testing, right?
Well, precisely, you mentioned that there was no reference in terms of experiment on product development. That was, I think, by far the most interesting piece of personal development in the product space for me. I think with Clue, that's where I dabble into like really doing a lot of in-depth user interviews and user research, because there's just really no competitors to really compare. It's not like an e-commerce kind of product where like, okay, there's 5 competitors that's doing it well. I really remember the early days, we are always questioning ourselves, like, is this interaction the way that people want to use this? We don't know. We are like, okay, should people have more options or less options? Of course, what I can admit is we haven't answered all of that question, but I think what we did is, like I said, we ran a lot of user research, we did a lot of market research, and I think we pride upon really, without any doubt that we believe is true, is to talk to as many users as possible. We even actually, at one point, we even recruited people who were not using this product, but we just wanted to understand much more, like from a market research perspective, how do they perceive their cycle? How do they think about tracking this if they are not using any product? So kind of really going down to the roots itself. Are we solving a problem and asking ourselves, are we solving this right? Um, I At that point, it felt like normal, or at least like I was learning because like I had very good mentors in Clue. But then now looking back, now that I've been in other companies, I realized that that kind of way of thinking of product development is not so common because there's really not so many products, which is like, when we were building it, there was not so many competitors. So yeah, I'm pretty thankful with that experience. The challenges there, I remember when you're in it, you are like, do you trust your intuition? This is really when, a lot of the intuition piece comes in, or you really doubt yourself. I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot of decision empowerment pieces when I was with Clue, because there was just sometimes there was just no right answer. We just didn't know. We just have to do it, bite the bullet, and just go for it. So like that kind of like really helped me set me up for success. Actually, I think with my subsequent startups, sometimes I give that same advice to other people when they said like, no, but we haven't tested enough. We don't have enough data. We don't know. And I said like, you know what? You won't know until you put it out. Yeah. So I feel like that was such a good fundamental um, learning experience for me and Clue for me is like my first startup. So I feel so much for it.
So it sounds like a little bit do it fast, learn rapidly, succeed at not only prototyping, but actually put an MVP out there, put users on it, test it, ask them, get feedback, rather than take like 3 or 4 years to make it into a perfectly well-designed and experience-designed product. Is it like that?
I would say that we are in the middle. With Clue, if you look at it, it is a very beautiful app. And I think in the early days itself, I think the founders were very, very clear that we want to make sure that the interaction is simple, very straightforward, but it is also beautiful. And I think that's something that the whole team pride upon with. I mean, we are still MVP-ish. I mean, there's still a lot of things that we were building, but we did not want to forego the piece where it's simple, it's easy, but it's also beautiful. And I think 5 years ago, I think that's when the whole UI UX topic is kind of like blowing up on everybody's face. Like this is the time to like make things more beautiful. And I think Clue kind of early got onto that bandwagon there, and that's also why I think its initial success was kind of tied to that.
So was experience design research part of the very early days of Clue?
Very much. So I was an early employee, but I would say that the initial co-founders, they had someone who was thinking about product and design and brand on a very, very early on. And I think that really paid off in the long run as well.
Well, great story.
And a lot more. And just before we go, when you mentioned femtech, it's a little bit of like, because Ida, the founder of Clue, was the person that coined the term femtech. So I mean, think about it. 5 years ago, this term femtech does not exist, and now people kind of say it like, oh, femtech, medtech, all these different techs that you hear. But I remember the day they were telling me, you know what, we kind of like got this name, femtech. We named this category because previously we were just like what tech do we call ourselves? We are like, okay, yeah, we are a tracker. So we are in health tech. So we said like, yeah, we're definitely in health tech, but we are more than that. And so yeah, it's really nice to hear that you mentioned femtech.
Indeed, yeah. And I think Ida is also a great person herself. Done lots of things as well. But let's move on from health products to design tools. You worked at Framers, an innovative design to code approach. helped speeding up prototyping and development cycles within digital products, I think, and probably much, much more. So as a director of growth, you conducted user testing, among other techniques. How did it help you to grow this product and optimize revenue there?
So let's take a bit of a change in setting, as you mentioned. Framer is clearly very different from, the health tech stuff and the med tech stuff that I'm doing. When I joined Framer, I feel like I need to tell a little bit more context about Framer before answering your question.
Go
and maybe remind me of your question midway if I forget. When I joined Framer as director of growth, they were on a little bit of a different trajectory as Clue. For Clue, it was a priority in the first years as a B2C product. You need to grow first, and then you think about monetization later. Framer, on the other hand, is a B2B2C. Of course, you need to acquire designers to use the tool, but for all tools that designers use, usually a company buys for you the tool. So in the end, you still need to convince the company. And when I joined Framer, Framer had pretty good traction organically in their first year or so, but then they couldn't figure out how can we scale to get more companies on board or more designers on board, because designers kind of tells their company, hey, you know what, there's this tool, I need it for me to be more productive. So it's kind of like that's why I said B2B2C, because there's this visual cycle in the end where the designers are also informing the organizations they are in that this is what they need in order to be productive and to be faster, to be more efficient in what they do. And I'm coming in a very interesting stage to help them grow. Back to your question, I need you to probably repeat it because I probably forgot. What was your initial question?
No worries. Firstly, I wanted to know how you conducted user testing at Framer, because I think this is interesting for user experience designers or researchers to know to user testing for a tool for them.
Okay. So for Framer, that was definitely part of my job scope as well. How we did we were actually very strong on the community piece. So Framer, I think the way it has grown in the very beginning is because of the strong community it has. So when I joined as a director of growth, and I said like, okay, let's do some user testing, understand what's happening, how people use this tool. And for me, the initial sessions were actually for myself, because I'm not a designer, I'm a product person that also uses this tool, but I'm not the person who is like heavy user of this tool. So I said like, I want to see how would an ideal user use this tool. We did a lot of recruitment through the community, to be honest, very successfully. So and being in Amsterdam, there's just so many tech companies. To be honest, we never had problems getting people to come to the office because they are like, oh yes, we want to see the Framer office as well. And trust me, as a design company, they have such a beautiful office. So that's really such a good pull to get people to come to just visit the office, do a user interview session with the team, and kind of like figure things out. But of course, we have also done some online interviews, which is quite typical, using different tools. But I would say the most successful ones were definitely the ones that we got people to come into the office.
Interesting. Why?
Because with the tool, because we had a setup, most of the time, when it comes to user testing for tools such as Framer, we want to also emulate what a designer's work desk look like. And so kind of like getting them to the office, and there's so many designers, so we roughly know what kind of setup it is. So then they can have the big screen, they have like all their mouse, monitor, whatever they need in order to design. And we want to see them in like the most natural environment. And what we notice on the online sessions is like they are on a laptop. So they are much more ready to go for an interview, but they are not ready to kind of show me how they are working most of the time. So that's a bit of a different setup. Of course, the con here is like, then we need to recruit people that is only in Amsterdam. Yes, we understand that, but we felt like the value of like seeing the person in action doing something itself was so much, brings so much value. But of course, we were trying to also kind of vary the demographics, the kind of designers in different levels, in different kind of organizations coming in.
Any other methods you used for research efforts?
We also use surveys, but that was, I would say, pretty standard method of delivery. We either share it in our Slack channel, community Slack channel, or we send it through email. So again, what I'm trying to highlight here are the things that I think is slightly different from the typical setup, but otherwise we are also we run typical standard interviews. We do quite some lightning interviews as well. Framer is pretty, how is it, pretty active in the community piece, meaning that in different cities itself, there's a lot of meetups. So we do a lot of recruitments there, so that we get more people who are interested in talking to us from different cities. If that's a tip, I would say that's probably a tip.
Yeah, definitely. What was the biggest challenge at Framer? Was there one?
Biggest challenge. So the challenge here is also, I wouldn't say challenge. Why I joined is also what drives me the most is that I can't believe when I joined Framer, I couldn't believe the growth that they already got organically. And I think when I joined as a director of growth, what I was bringing onto the table for the team is also the growth mindset, a very different kind of growth mindset, a bit more. It's also organic growth with a combination of paid piece, but they have never met. They've never worked with a growth team before, like which is completely data driven, very experimental. So again, I would say the founders and the team when I joined very, very solid. They have this is what I call, they have really good intuition of what makes a great product. And I think they know that. And then with the growth piece coming in, my challenge is also to challenge them. Now we can put some data to your intuition. So just now when I mentioned earlier in the interview, I said like, oh, I'm combining research, data, and intuition for Framer, the intuition of the founders, because they were also designers. They know exactly what problems they're solving. But then now I come in and say like, okay, let's now add a little bit more to all this intuition, like putting data on top of it, putting a bit more research on top of it. So again, so there is a bit of like that fun piece as well, because then there's something else to challenge their intuition. I'm not saying that intuition is wrong, but it's either strengthening that or sometimes kind of giving them a bit of a nudge, like, have you thought about it a different way? So yeah, for me that was quite an interesting piece because it's also a mindset change for the organization. But I think as long as a startup is open to think about the growth piece, then I don't think it's always a difficult piece. It's a lot about changing the way you think about things, and sometimes also believing the results that you see. It's like if you think like you start an experiment and then you believe like, oh, this is the more beautiful one. I am sure this is going to work, and then you realize, yikes, why is the one that is like the most boring one worked out better? I mean, like you don't really have any answer to that. But your users, for me, users speaks louder than words, and that result sometimes, you have to take it.
What was the team setup? Where did you have your own team, or did you work with all product or design persons, managers, specialists?
So when I come in, there was no growth team. How it started in the very beginning is like, of course, I'm pulling resources from different teams, kind of like to slowly get like my mini team. But the mandate was to grow your own team. We had a data scientist, so actually the growth and marketing team were the first team to say like, we need a data scientist. So before the growth and marketing team, there was no data scientist. How they looked at data was like, let's go to the founders and ask them like, where can we get this data? Because of course, being founders being founders, they have their data in the fingertips. They know how many users they have. They know where's this information sitting. But with the growth team coming in, that's when we kind of start strengthening different capabilities in the organization. So yeah, we were building up new capabilities and we also hiring. So the setup was pretty much a typical growth team setup. So we were trying to staff full stack. So we were looking for engineers that were growth mindset driven, that could do quite a diverse kind of like programming, and we were also trying to pull in a more growth driven designer.
So lots of sharing information and knowledge first.
Yeah, I think in the beginning that was very important. I think, and the good thing is, I would say that the entire company or like the organization knew how important the growth piece was, because they knew that if you're not nailing the growth piece in the next couple of years, then you're not going to make it.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's a tough one. I mean, like B2B to C, and like I said, there was a lot of competition in the design space, and all these companies are raising a lot of money, including Framer as well. But in order to really compete, you need to consistently innovate.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. So you're also a venture partner at Antler right now, a global early stage VC firm. How do you support startups and founders there?
Ah, how I support startups and founders there. I come in pretty much early stages. So Antler, as you mentioned, is an early stage VC, and they do a lot of ideation and incubation of initial ideas already. They are a 10-week program, and as a venture partner, I come in various stages. I do come in during their program stage in that 10 weeks, depending on some of the ideas that the founders are coming up with. If it's within some of my areas of expertise, I either challenge them and ask them, like, is this even the right idea to think about, or where can they think about this problem and how they can think about this problem. But where I come in is also post post program, if they have gotten some initial investment, how to kind of think about the initial scaling and growth, where I come in with my growth expertise and say, like, okay, now that you got the idea, you have your initial MVP, how do you test things out? Same question like you asked me. Are we doing the user research right? Are we doing the user testing correctly? Do we have the initial right growth channel? If you're building an app, is your app store optimization done right? If you're building on web, do you have SEO done right? I mean, so a lot of those questions that normally first-time founders might not necessarily feel comfortable talking about or addressing, because they simply feel like they just can't cover everything. So that's where I come in a little bit. And then it's up to me how much I want to interact with all these different teams as I get to know them.
And what's the most common mistakes startup founders do in terms of experience design or research? Is there one?
Common mistakes, hard to say. I think I would say that for new founders, that if you're first-time founders, you might tend to under-validate the ideas. They tend to really believe that, okay, this idea must be like the greatest idea and it's applicable to every single person. So I think this is a little bit of a fallacy. And I'm always challenging, like, no, if they are making an exercise app or something, or in the health tech, that's suddenly, oh yeah, the whole health tech category is like my oyster. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. You're offering something very kind of specific. Yes, all these people are your addressable market, but you need to be much more specific as well as you build products, because you can't build a product for everybody. You can build better products for a specific segment. So I would say that is quite one of the things that I noticed. Like, they tend to, like, at one point they're like, oh yeah, I need to build a mass market product, and like my product will appeal to every single person. And that kind of like that is a harder challenge for them to tackle, because then they are like, oh yeah, now I can do 200 things. What 200 things do I do? Instead of, like, if I focus in maybe one user segment or one use case, whatever that product offering is, that would have been much, much more easier for them to tackle their product development.
Mm-hmm. I've asked myself as an advisor, do you calculate the value of experience design or research?
Do we calculate? Actually, no, not specifically, but I'll be curious how you calculate that.
Well, that's a good question. I think there are many different options. Thought you might have one formula for us.
No. My simple motto is design itself. Beautiful design itself is not a USP. This is what I recently mentioned to a startup. I think it should be mandatory. It is a fundamental piece. It has to be, it has to work. I'm not saying that it has to be like so extraordinarily beautiful, but like it has to be, it makes sense. It's not like, oh, just place some ugly thing there and then people will buy it because, it's functional. So I would say that I don't know how to calculate the value, but that's what the advice I say, like, don't fixate so much on the nitty-gritty details, like, oh yeah, is it pixel perfect? No, I'm not asking you that, but I would say that the UI UX should be very functional, almost beautiful. Um, because I think that is expected from users, expect that right now. That's the shift in trends. People are forgiving about like not so beautiful things, but now people tend to also experience so many beautiful things. So I would say that that's a fundamental piece. Is if you want to build something, it has to look beautiful, and that is not a USP. So that's something that I've mentioned it multiple times. I feel in the last couple of weeks. Yeah, but I don't know how to measure it. Yeah, I'm curious. Now you've given me something to think about.
Well, then we let this question open.
Yeah.
If you have the answer, get back to me.
Yeah.
I'm curious as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more important if you think of Framer, for example, because the users are designers, more aesthetics maybe than others?
In what sense when you said framer, in terms of user testing or?
In terms of design.
Definitely, I would say in framer, my design skills also improved because like I'm just surrounded by people who likes beautiful design. I mean, like you just get influenced. I don't know. I mean, like then you figure out like, oh, this is like the tips and tricks of design. And of course, I mean at framer, I would say even the developers are like very design centric because they just have an eye because you're building a tool for designers. So it is like, I don't know, not double the pressure, even triple the pressure, because they said like if my tool is not beautiful for designers, which designers are gonna use it? So I think the benchmark of beautiful, usable, and like functional, it's all like add on top of each other. So that is that. That's all I can say. And like to be honest, at Framer, I think I've worked with like probably like the best designers I can imagine. Like every single designer there have an eye for design to a certain extent. The way they think about it, I'm like, oh, mind blowing.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
um, I thought about one thing with Framer is maybe AI or machine learning. Will it have some impact in the next couple of years? Was it a topic back then when you worked for Framer? Is it a topic now? Is it a topic at Ambos right now or at your VC?
I think in general, let's make it a general question. I think it's hard to say in specific industry, but I know. So this is a topic that AI machine learning has been. I feel like it's a buzzword. On one hand, it's like the okay, so pet peeve here. My husband is a mathematician, so I hear this all the time. So I would say AI is still at the brink of like, how is it, the tipping point? As in, like a lot of people don't understand it. I can admit it that I don't fully understand it, but like for machine learning, it is about methods where you kind of understand past behaviors and make a lot of predictions for the future behaviors, and that's what machine learning is doing. And I think that that's already there. It's just that the term right now becomes more common. I'm not sure if I don't think it's a trend, but I would say that in almost everything we do, there is some sort of ML AI dot happening. Whether is it fully kind of utilizing its potential, I don't know yet. But I do know that you know it's not so easy to say like, oh, I want to use artificial intelligence to predict something. I mean, I can give you a very simple thing. Even at Clue, we had so many users, we had so many data points. We thought about AI ML topic for a long time. Can we use all this data to predict something for the users who gave me their own data, not for anything else? Like we give you back what you give us in a smarter way. And sometimes it's harder than you think because there is just no good insight to offer to the user. So I also feel it's a combination of like, do we actually have enough information to give good predictions, to use all these methodologies, or this method just sounds kind of sexy, but you can't really do much with what we have right now. So that's just food for thought as well. So I kind of like when I think AI, ML, I kind of take it with a pinch of salt. It's nice to say like, oh yeah, we are AI tool. Really, I don't think it's that easy to do it because you need so much information, so much input in order to be really smart.
That's right. I think lots of designers, managers, researchers, well, researchers not that much, but designers think about if AI is a risk for their jobs, maybe. So that's why it's always interesting to hear one's opinion on that.
I've never thought about that. I still feel like in the end, there might be some parts that can be automated, but in the end, with highly
It's actually
like
a question of can AI create something new, creativity. That's actually the key, the core of the work of designers, or make something really innovative and new, which Clue is, which is probably Framer as well.
good one. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, I don't have an answer for that, but I'm curious to see what that comes up. I would say that I feel like it's still at the brink of a tipping point, but not yet kind of like knowing what the outcome could be. But yes, I would say like all your thoughts, I think it's a possibility.
So then we have our top 5.
Mm-hmm.
What's your number one experience design or research book?
Experience. I actually do have. Hard to answer. Actually, I'm looking at my bookshelf now as you ask me this question.
Or any other book which comes to your mind, which is really like mind blowing.
Um, you know, um, I mentioned the word multiple times in this particular podcast, so I guess the book would be Tipping Point.
Mm-hmm.
I I mean, I guess it's one of my favorite books because it also makes you think about how you build great products. How you think about it's a little bit, yeah, it's a combination of growth. Like people ask the question, is it luck that this product which didn't seem so sexy suddenly like everybody wants it? So yeah, I mean, if there's something right now that's anchored in my mind, the book would be Tipping Point. I really really like the book. If you haven't read it, I would suggest you read it. I like it very much.
I have it in my bookshelf. So I know, yeah. A good colleague of mine sent it to me once. Number one resource, blog, podcast, any resource.
For what? For user research?
For, yeah, research or design or product growth. You have so
Number one
many
resource.
specialties, expertise. I don't.
Yeah, I know. I would give a shout out to the mobile growth stack. I'm not sure if you know the feature team. Um, they definitely don't know I'm mentioning them right now, but I do use them and their framework quite a lot. I know the founders very well, and we do a lot of brainstorming sometimes for some of the different challenges I have. I would definitely go them to as a resource if you're thinking from a product growth perspective, taking your product from very early stage to whatever stage that is. I think it's very applicable. I like that framework, so look at them. They have a very nice blog post. They have a very nice community as well. So, I would say follow them.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Number one person you follow in terms of product experience, design, research, growth.
Number one person I follow. That's a tough one here. I would say, can I skip this one right now? You kind of caught me off guard. You can tell the audience that I'll get back to them.
All right, we do that. Number one research method.
Number one, research method. I definitely love the face-to-face user interviews. I feel like that is the hardest one. But for me, it's always the most like, I leave the session feeling drained. I'm like, oh my God, I've like have no energy right now. My brain is on like overdrive, but you can learn so much from just looking at a user, understanding the way they are saying certain things, and it always is a push of your, how is it? Um, no matter how many times you do it, it's always different. So yeah, that's my favorite method, even though I feel like sometimes it's actually quite hard, but yeah.
I'd say yes. Number one skill, you said you're a product person. Number one skill a product person needs to have.
I would say, persistence.
Mhm.
Um, I would say a lot of persistence and really be open. I mean, like, okay, it's not one, but two, but I would say also be very, very, it's like you need to persist on your idea, but also be very flexible. I feel like, it's kind of schizophrenic the way I'm saying it, but like you need to have both. You need to be firm on what you know, but you should also be very flexible in terms of, trying a lot of new things. I think that makes a really good product person.
Thanks, Adeline. It was great talking to you. Really interesting, exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really happy you invited me.
Thanks.